How do you instigate and make real a reset in your HR unit right here in the Caribbean? Hi, my friends. If you're here to answer that question, you're in the right place, because we're not only going to examine that question, but we're going to also ask the question, how do you make such a reset happen without losing C-suite support or gaining C-suite support? How do you pull this off in a way that makes it work and produces the results that you want? And if you're an HR professional, you may not be heading up an organization or be a CHRO. How do you reach it yourself so that you're in position to execute a reset of an HR function whenever you want at any point in the future? For this and other deep questions, welcome to CaribHRForum's launch of our Virtual Conference 2023 Virtual Conference Series. If we've not met, my name is Francis Wade, and I am the co-host of CaribHRForum, also the founder. My host is Dale Pilgrim Wade. She's in the chat, and the two of us are the ones who are sort of behind the scenes. Later on, I'll introduce you to some of our other colleagues who are going to be joining us on the stage here today. But let's start off by getting to know a little bit about who you are and how you are. Are your fingers working? Drop a note in the chat, because today's going to be very interactive. So I want you to know that if you're here to figure out this reset business, that your fingers are working and that you're paying attention and you're not watching Facebook, you're not checking email. Hey, Jim Eastwood. Jim, how are you? That's Jim from England, I think. Joni Gay says my fingers are very active. Joni Gay has a book coming out, so her fingers need to be very active. Hello, Miss Tony Spencer. Tony, you don't know, but a comment that you made to me a few years ago is actually the inspiration for today's session in some ways. I'll tell you about that later. Hi, Natasha. So, folks, I'm going to actually start the ball rolling by creating a poll, dropping a poll in the chat, because I want to know who we're talking to here. I want to make sure that we're tailoring our conversation to everyone who is in attendance. So, what's your familiarity with people analytics? We're talking about doing a reset, and the tool that we're going to be using is people analytics. What's your familiarity? Are you someone you're so expert that you could be up here doing a better job than I am? Are you someone who is people? How much? Never heard the term before. You may be in the wrong webinar for all I know. But just drop an answer in the chat, and let's see where we're at, so that I and the other presenters can kind of tailor our conversation to include you, and we'll have the right level of discussion, because we don't want to go too high or too low and have everyone sort of hanging, wondering what the heck is going on here. Okay, so far we have one very familiar. Yes. I hope that's not Kerron, okay? Because Kerron, you shouldn't be voting. But mostly we are in the neutral zone and a bit of familiarity, it looks like. Okay, I'm gonna leave that open for a couple more seconds just so that we know where we're at. When I stop seeing those numbers change, I will drop a note in the chat if you're not clear or if you can't see the poll for some reason. But as those numbers keep moving. Wow, we have 53 people in session. If you're just joining us, we're answering a poll. What's your familiarity with people analytics? We're about to tailor this conversation to the folks that we have. So very familiar is struggling along with the one vote. And most are sort of neutral. That makes me think that, yes, I've heard the term. I've read some things about it. I imagine most of them are outside of the region and they're not in the region. So we have a clear winner, it looks like, and the winner is neutral, kind of in the middle. All right, great. So I'm going to just hide the poll from the stage. If you want to continue answering the poll, if you're just coming in, you can do that by clicking on the three bars that are kind of to the left of the chat. Okay. I'm going to hide the poll from the stage for the moment because we have such a clear and obvious winner. All right. So having said that, let me share my screen. And as I share my screen, let me turn off some annoying features from PowerPoint. When PowerPoint picks up the words that you're saying, and then let's see what we have here. Okay. Share that screen. Okay. Okay, it's still showing my words. Okay, let me turn that off. And it's not showing me that screen. I love technology. There's always some weird thing going on that you didn't quite account for. Okay, doesn't like me to do that. Okay, so here we are today. I recommend that you turn off all distractions, put away your phone, stop checking your email, turn off Facebook, whatever you've been doing, and focus on this presentation because we believe this is actually could be life-changing for some. It's interactive, as you know. We've been talking with each other and going back and forth. Kerron says that Murphy joined the session. To introduce you to the Q&A button on the left side, you'll see that yellow arrow. It's pointing to the place where we can find your questions most easily. So if you have questions, just click on that button which says QA, and then come back to the chat when you're ready. If you want to drop a message in there or a question so that we can find it. We also have some resources today, which consist of actually a short clip and also some lots of links. So click on that resources tab if you want to access the links or the information. One of the links is to a video with Tamika Stewart, who's our special guest today. She'll be sharing some of her background and what brings her to how she came to people analytics. And then at the end of the afternoon, we're going to be have a very special offer in which I'll be describing something, but you got to stay till the end. No. And after we're finished the formal session, we'll be going into a breakout room where we'll be meeting and greeting each other. We're also trialing a new kind of feature, which is within the hour after we're finished this formal session, the replay will actually be available at this link. So if by chance you're logging in late or you missed something, I'll be sending out a note which lets everybody know that the link is up and running. So next week, Saturday, something special to tell you about. I mentioned a young lady by the name of Jody Gay Cawley. She has authored a book. And the launch of the book, The Influential HR, is going to be on Saturday, the 30th. Not this Saturday, but next Saturday here in Kingston, Jamaica. So if you're here, this is a chance to, if you've ever wanted to meet me, or more likely you'll want to meet Dale than you will want to meet me. Okay. Those of you who don't know, Dale is my wife. But I'll be there as well, tagging along. But the book launch is also going to be an in-person meetup for CaribHRForum, where we kind of piggybacking and meeting and greeting as we enjoy Joni Gay's book, her brand new book. And, you know, kudos to her for all the hard work that she's just put in. I'm going to quickly turn off this. Try again to turn off this. Yep, I'm getting some weird stuff behind the scenes here. You know, it's not showing me that. Oh, here we go. There we go. Wanted to turn off those words. Also, at the moment, we actually have a sale happening with our friends at AIHR. So AIHR is a company that offers a 11 program certificate. One of them is in people analytics. It's a really, really good program. And right now they're offering 20% off, but they also will add on the 20% that we get if you use the link that's at the top of the screen. So I'm going to ask Dale to drop that link in the chat so that if you're interested in checking out their offering, that you do so sometime today. And then finally, the last bit of sort of business news is that we're currently also doing a compensation survey. So if you're interested in having information like what you're seeing on the screen and being able to say to your C-suiters, folks who are running your company, that here's some information that you may want to know about where our salaries are at with respect to the region. It's just a overall survey that's going to capture what salary movements have been in the region by country for the last year and a half. Okay, so if you want that kind of information, be sure to exercise that link. The link is to a survey where you can share your compensation information, and it'll be combined with others and then shared out in a report. So let me tell you about Gene. So Gene came from a company that had people analytics implemented in every department. They were pretty advanced. Now, as the HR manager in a new organization which he just joined, no one shares her firsthand experience. But she's convinced that people analytics that will make a difference if implemented correctly. The problem is that she wasn't around when her prior company set up their structure. She joined several years later, so she don't know what happened in the very beginning. She came at a point where it was already running and already existing. Now she has a meeting with her current CEO, who was asked to see her after only 6 months in the new position. As the highest ranked HR professional, she hopes he wants her to attend the upcoming strategic planning retreat. All right, she wants a seat at the table. So he says, I'd like to invite you to attend the retreat, but I'm concerned. He pauses because he's kind of choosing his words carefully. In prior retreats, he says, HR added very little value. It was frustrating. But she says, well, what was missing? He says, it's hard to put my finger on it, but I can depend on the other department heads to present factual data they've collected. HR never seems to have more than just a few stories. She says, but CEO, you know we don't have the tools in place to collect data in the HR unit. She's trying not to whine and to complain. He says, I'm not blaming you, but the business needs a cultural transformation, and I don't know if it's worth the investment. Can you come to the retreat prepared to lead this discussion? Gene says, to be honest, I'm not sure, but let me get back to you by Friday with a clear answer. So Gene is someone who we could imagine is sitting in our midst in this webinar wondering, how do I answer the questions that he wants me to answer? In other words, how do I better leverage human capital? Because you may know already that this is a Caribbean-wide problem. We have major productivity issues. The IDB has reported it for many years, but let me show you some actual numbers. When it comes to manufacturing, we are not performing very well. Our labor productivity growth, it's not growth, it's been contracting. In the services area, it's also been contracting, not as much as some other parts of the world, but we're not doing well as a region when it comes to productivity. And if you ask an HR person, they would echo what Gene's boss would say, which is that, well, HR isn't strategic enough. What the heck does that mean? So our interpretation is that there's a couple of challenges that they're really trying to put into words. So Gene's boss didn't have the words to really say, and many CEOs that we work with don't. So the one thing that is really going on is that there's no data. There's just not people analytics across the business. And this is not about the HR unit. This is in every part of the company. So when they want to do something like a transformation, there's no data to work with. The second challenge that we think is that the HR units are not ready. They're not ready to lead people analytics across the company. I mean, God forbid a CFO would say, okay, I'll do it. But we've seen that happen before. IT, oh yeah, we can put together people analytics, which to us is a huge mistake. But given those two challenges, I want to hear from you. What issues do you see blocking human capital, blocking productivity here in the Caribbean? And I don't want to restrict this just to our topic of the day, people analytics, but what do you see as the issues that are in the way of our region moving to the next level and providing the profit that we need for our companies, the wages that we need for our people, stop our people from migrating? Here in Jamaica, places like Bahamas, we have problems with people migrating. What issues do you see blocking human capital? So drop that in the chat, please. Looks like people are thinking about it. Joni Gay says they're not tracking productivity. You know, what gets measured gets done. So if you're not measuring anything, no work gets done. And Giselle says lack of a robust HRIS systems. And those HRIS systems, as you know, they don't come for free, right? They require an investment. So at some point in the future, every company will have an HRIS of a decent size, right? But until we get to that point, we're in this zone where the cost is just not au fait. It's digestible. It doesn't seem like there's a good ROI for investing in an HRIS for most companies. Beverly says if your employees are not engaged, that's a problem. And if you can't measure that engagement, then what the heck are you talking about? Are you only talking about doing happiness surveys? And Audrey says a lack of accountability and poor performance management framework. I worked with a large company recently that does its performance management on paper. And as you could imagine, they don't have analytics to really work with when it comes time to making decisions. So we're all on the same, in the right boat, I believe, at the moment. So I'm going to move on. You can keep answering in the chat. But who we want to help today are three kinds of people. The first kind are C-suiters who want leverage to impact the bottom line through better people analytics. Now, this came up as a problem during COVID, where there needed to be analytics to understand the impact of all of the changes that were being made. Today, it's a problem because there's no analytics around what happens when people move back into the office, for example. No detailed analytics. There's a thought, a feeling, a couple of stories, but then that's it. And there's CEOs making decisions based on those thoughts, feelings, and stories. So we want to help the C-suite, all the members of the C-suite, use people analytics to leverage their businesses, their respective lines of business. We want to help HR departments to accomplish a transformation, which is not possible without data. And finally, we want to help the individual who wants you as an individual who are up to the challenge of either taking your career to the next level or your department to the next level or your company to the next level. Our argument is that if you're an HR professional, there is one path that must be taken. So as we dig below this business of being not strategic enough, we say that there's three kinds of facts that we see across the region. The first is that there are very few HR professionals who make it to CEO. No, there's exactly two that I know of in the region, and we've met a lot of HR professionals. Two of them happen to be in Trinidad, and Jane White is one of them, and she's spoken here at CaribHRForum. She's actually going to speak in one of our future sessions in this conference. But here's something else that we're also picking up, and you tell me if you've also seen this. So recently I chatted with a head of IT. She was the head of IT 6 years ago. She's now the head of HR. They went to her and said, we know you're really busy and IT is a big problem and technology and digital transformation, but do you think you could also do the HR function for just a while, while we search for someone? 6 years later, she's now the HR person. And this is what we're seeing, which is that if you look at some of the biggest companies, there's a head of marketing in head of one, there is a head of a business unit who doesn't have any HR background, the head of another. And it's almost as if the bigger the company, the more likely it is that the head of HR does not have a formal HR background. It's something that they've picked up along the way. And the belief among CEOs in the C-suite is that the job of a CHRO or a CPO or a VP HR is that you don't really need to have an HR background to do the job. I don't like where this is going, but tell me what you see in the. Tony said this is becoming more mainstream. So there's something going on here something's not happening in the HR departments across the region that could be happening. And that's actually why we're here today, to make something happen where it should happen, not in the experience of a head of IT or the head of marketing, who does HR in their spare time and then becomes the VP. No. There's something that we need to do on our part. People who care about the HR function. Below, not strategic enough. There's this business of not having the right tools, which we talked about already. But also, we don't observe HR professionals upskilling themselves aggressively enough or quickly enough. The result? Boy, a vicious cycle. So take a moment to absorb this picture. Because what it says is that a lot of HR departments are stuck. They can't make a case for a greater investment because they don't have the data. And because they can't make the investment, they therefore can't implement an HRIS, which means that they therefore don't have the data, which therefore means that they won't have the HRIS. So what happens in a meeting, a strategic planning meeting like the ones that we attend, is that you hear cases made by different departments for investments in the company. And the HR presentation is, apart from one case out of the 50 that we've been in, doesn't come up to snuff. And it keeps the cycle going. The lack of investment prevents HR and the company from having the data it needs, which means further lack of investment, because then an ROI case is never made for a greater investment. I don't know if you had this experience, if you've been in the C-suite, you've been in strategic planning retreats and seen this happening. It's a slow-moving reality, we say, and it's one that we're out to disrupt today. And it's going to take some I say bitter medicine. I don't mean to say bitter like awful. I mean to say like, this is where we pull on our long pants. I was going to say something else. Put on our long pants and start to get serious about turning around a trend that's been happening, I think, ever since the recession in the 2008-9 period. So how do we overcome this cycle? And who are we to say that we want to overcome it? Well, today I want to persuade you that there's a new category of training and growth that would unlock this vicious cycle. And we've done our best to embed this approach in the conference series I'm about to share with you. So I'm going to share with you the kind of the logic and also the physical steps, the literal steps we're going to take to implement this logic. So who are we? The host and co-host. So Dale and I we own Framework Consulting, which you can just see sort of upstairs from me here. And we've done over 50 strategic planning retreats for the last 20 years. They always look at 15 to 20 year horizons, where we specialize in long-term and short-term strategic planning. And, we've had CEOs pull us aside in retreats after retreats and complain that their HR function is, and we've been there and seen where HR starts to present, because we always insist that HR presents. So HR is always at the table. That was a struggle of the early 2000s, that HR isn't at the table. We've not seen that. We've seen HR always at the table. But when HR gets up to present, the other folks start checking their email, or they go to the room to go do some calls, or they glaze out. And to say that it's awful is a sort of an understatement. But don't take our word for it. I want to introduce you to my co-panelists here today, and you'll hear much more from them from now on than you will from me, from Georgia Donaldson and Kerron Ramganesh. And let me tell you a bit about both of them as they appear on stage. Kerron, Georgia first, sorry. Ladies first. Georgia is a behavioral coach and HR consultant who has held executive HR positions in some of the top HR companies in the region, like GMMB and National Flour Mills in Trinidad. And she has a track record which has positioned her as a sought-after trainer and presenter on various management and leadership topics. And Kerron is, among other things, he's kind of one of the chief instigators of all this. He's our head designer. He came to us early this year and said, "We have to do something different." They repeated that. I was the one who was like, "Well, But anyway, he's an HR and people analytics practitioner with over a decade of regional project experience across multiple industries, including public sector, finance, manufacturing, and aviation. That does not do justice to him, but that's what he sent me. So I'm just reading what he sent me. So are you guys on the wait? You guys aren't on the stage. Something weird is going on. Let's try again. Okay, I see Kerron coming on and Georgia coming on. Whoa, I'm seeing all kinds of things happening. Great, Kerron and Georgia.
The screen is going haywire, Francis.
I know, it's a browser underneath it jumped up and covered my presentation. Guys, welcome to the webinar.
Hi. I think Murphy was backstage there.
I tell you, I didn't even see it happening. Guys, welcome. I'm going to jump right into the secrets and then have you speak to the 3 secrets of what we say would tear apart this vicious cycle, because we put our heads together, the 3 of us, 4 of us, including Dale, and said, what would be the disruptor? How do we effectively dismantle this vicious cycle so that companies can escape and HR professionals can escape its grip? And the first secret has to do with 3-corner programming, and this has to do with the way we set up the virtual conference. And I hinted before that there's this line of thinking that we took. And what's the line of thinking that we took using this new transformational structure? So I'm going to ask them to share sort of examples that we talked about that help to illustrate the approach that we've taken, you might say, our different experiences, put them together and come up with something that we call 3-corner programming. So, Georgia?
You want me to go ahead? All right. Yeah. So here's what I'd love you to picture this. So everybody who is on, just picture this. You are head of HR for a manufacturing entity, and you have been doing a job, your team, of working on absenteeism, so attendance and punctuality. So you've been keeping records on that. And then you recognize that your CEO is looking at productivity and when production actually starts. So each month you do your report and you see that people are coming, for the most part, on time, and they're there. But then production still is not starting on time. So you now have to go beyond the numbers, behind the numbers. What's causing that? So you have a shift of 30 persons. Of those 30 persons, at least 25 of them are always there on time. That's what the clock says. But when you go behind the numbers, you recognize, hey, they clock in at a certain time. They're not on the production line at the time you want them to be there. Why is this so? They go for breakfast. Okay, so what time do they go for breakfast? So if the shift starts at 7 a.m., production is supposed to be starting at 7. But people are clocking in at 7. They're on time. All right. But you also have some persons who are clocking at 6:30, but they're not starting because they're having breakfast. But that was never a problem before. Then you realize the breakfast provider has been coming late. And because that person comes late, they have breakfast late and then production starts late. So the point we're making here is, as an HR professional, it's not good enough just to have those numbers. You have to go behind those numbers to see what's happening. And then when you do that, you're able now to make decisions on how you're going to do things differently. Another thing we looked at, where the clocking station is, it takes at least 5 minutes from where they are clocking in to the production area. Should you now be situating the clocking station closer to the production area? So HR professionals, these are some of the things that we need to start thinking about, not just producing the numbers, but looking closely at the numbers, analyzing them, and going behind those numbers. Kerron, what do you think about that?
No, I think it's absolutely on point, because as HR people, we are always, as we say, putting out fires, right? And usually those fires are based on issues that come up across the organization. I think being analytical, as we kind of looking at it, is really just a mindset shift, because we have been solving the problems. I think it's really in the way in how we approach solving those problems and getting the the support and buy-in for it. Getting into the figures, looking at the trends and patterns and trying to understand what's going on and why is very important, because we would answer those questions through, like I have a warehouse case as well, where they were looking at, why workers were leaving, why workers weren't as productive as they should be. And when you look at the numbers, it was really based on, the numbers are coming in, absenteeism rates by supervisor, getting higher pay rates by their competitors. And it really, when I crunched all the numbers and went through the whole process of, understanding what's going on and why it's happening, the recommendation was as simple as increase the hourly rate by $1. And that improved a whole bunch of stuff for the company. The ROI was huge. So when you think about solving problems, we do solve problems, but this is a way in which we use evidence and data to really drive the solutions that we put in out. Yeah.
Great. That's a perfect entree into kind of what we think is the answer to creating what we call the ultimate impact. So we see this as a three-corner problem. Let me go into the three corners in detail, because we don't think this is just a matter of analytics. So the ultimate impact we want to have is that someone who goes through a reset, or a department that goes through a reset, thinks differently, acts differently, and feels differently. But there's a step at the end that we've added on, which we say is the kind of the ultimate test, which is that it gets noticed by the C-suite. Now, as I mentioned, this business of HR not making it to the CEO position because most of the CEOs have CFO backgrounds. It also means that their understanding of people and HR is weak, and that's across the board. So when it comes to understanding how to leverage people analytics, the C-suiters are weak. So they would have to see something different in behavior that HR is doing or is saying. And here are some of the things that we want to have happen in your department once the shift has begun. That HR is improving, you folks sound different. I like the way HR is acting. And what is it about HR? Is something different, because they can't put their finger on it because they don't have a people background. Another HR person will come along and say, oh, yeah, I can see what they're doing. But we're talking about the kind of reset that is noticeable by members of the C-suite. So that's a high bar, right? That's not just a matter of taking a course, taking a 3-week course somewhere and coming back knowing how to do something different. We're talking about a behavior change, right? So it involves people analytics, yes. I just said it's more than that. But data makes strategic thinking easy. So we interpret the complaint that HR is not strategic enough to be a complaint about data. Because in comparison to the other members of the C-suite, what we see in strategic planning retreats is that HR doesn't have the data and HR doesn't look as strategic as the others do. Data pushes you in a strategic direction. Kerron, Georgia, add to that for me.
Francis, that one, let me tell you something. You are taken seriously when you speak numbers. And I have seen that in my experience over the last 11 years at the C-suite level. When you come with numbers and you speak the story behind the numbers, you are taken much more seriously. Have you had that experience, Kerron?
Yeah. So before we talk about the importance of that, I think let's look at what HR currently does for the most part. Mm-hmm. We have data for some of our critical things, right? So let's say like employee exits, who we hire in, but we never really looked at it with regard to numbers. We more look at it as, okay, we have information about the people we've hired, but we've never really thought about it as, okay, we've hired an average of 5 persons per month over the last, for the year to date, and our headcount has increased by 15-20%. We've never looked at it like that. We usually have some data as we look at those records. And if HR just comes and says, okay, we hire 25 people and that's it, in a strategic meeting, it doesn't really add much value. But if we take that data, those numbers, and put them in context with regard to, let's say, organizational growth, let's say align it towards operational versus strategic versus administrative arms of the business, and how does that align to the strategic pillars that the organization has, and where they want to focus on. That's where you add value with the same content that you had in the first place. So it really is not only about the data, but it's how do we translate that data into meaning for the company and meaning for those other elements within the organization. So yeah, data does make it easy to be strategic. And sometimes you'll get asked, are you sure you're in HR? You don't sound like an HR person.
Yes.
That's what we want to produce here. We want that kind
Yes.
of dissonance, that kind of
Yes.
confusion to happen in the C-suite. I've only seen it happen one time in strategic planning retreats. One person did that, and we were stunned because we've never seen anything like it before. It was inspiring.
Yeah.
So the third leg, the third corner, is this business about ROI, being ROI positive. But I talk about dollars and cents. Like, who just said that? Was it Tony that said dollars and cents? So this reset business, there's a kind of way in which we've seen HR resorting to secret investments. Like you do your own training on your own time. You do your stuff on the weekend. You're on vacation. You pay for it out of your own pocket. You don't confront the fact that the company needs to invest. So you need to find a pathway to get the company to invest. What we're talking about, which is a hard reset, you cannot do on this on as a secret project. It has to have C-suite support. But guys, let me ask, or attendees or participants, why do I say you have to get C-suite support? And Kerron and Georgia, you can jump in also. Why? Why would I say such a thing?
Let's see if anybody will put something in the chat first, and then we'll jump in, because I have a story that I can share.
We all have stories, Georgia. You know that.
You might have to go ahead because it takes a moment for the chat to catch up. Go ahead, Georgia.
Okay.
It takes a
So
while.
The support.
Yes.
Let's talk about this one now of a learning management software. And the fancy thing these days, everybody wants a platform. Everybody wants a learning management platform. So you are the good HR person and you want to go out and you get quotes for your learning management software. Ooh, got some wonderful quotes from about 4 persons, 4 companies, 2 locally and 2 overseas. And yes, armed with the information, and go to the CEO and say, this is what this can do for the organization. First of all, without understanding what were the other priorities in the organization. So, of course, LMS is important for me and my department and what it can do for the organization. But then there are other priorities that were stacking up in front of that. And the weight of what I wanted was not heavy enough based on what was needed in the organization. So I was not daunted. What did I do? I got 2 of my persons in my department saying, hey guys, this is what's happening here. What can we do? And there's one particular individual who was gung-ho about it. And what did she do? Design our own LMS. So it's not perfect, but at least we had something to start with. So what does that say to us? It says to us as HR people, sometimes we may have to eat humble pie. So we have to reinvent the way we are doing things. We have to wheel and come again. So if you can't buy it, then you may have to build it. But it's important for us to see the importance of seeing things differently, of a different perspective, and pulling your team in to say, how can we do this if we can't get it externally? Kerron, what has happened in your space?
True.
You have to go quick because our time. I'm monitoring our time, so jump
yes.
Okay. There's a short story. When I recently joined an organization, it was a technical company, and of course, part of their training program would incorporate soft skills. And the first thing that usually gets cut is training and that kind of stuff when they're looking for budgeting. But I had to build a case, in terms of the fact that, listen, this was useful training. So had to go into employee data, look at it both before and after training sessions, and look at where there was an actual improvement in productivity. And of course, being able to quantify that, as we were highlighting in the chat, being able to quantify that to show a reduction in defects, returns, even increase in sales and the throughput, and being able to add a dollar value on that to build the case that, listen, we need this soft skill training because it actually improves supervisors, it improves customer service, it improves certain things that actually lent to the bottom line being improved. And of course, that was the way I was able to keep certain soft skill training back in the company. even at a course where other managers were like, why are you all getting so much money for this? But they did not see the relationship between soft skill training and the actual improvement within the company. So yeah, that's a little short story there for you all without too much details.
Right. So it's almost like without HR's guidance, C-suiters have a very difficult time equating people issues with dollars. So there's a
Indeed.
capability missing, and this is why I say this is a Caribbean-wide productivity problem. And for HR, the third leg of the stool, the third corner is that this is not business as usual. So I did some research, and you know what I found? Back in the 1980s, there was no such thing as a chief financial officer, a CFO. The term was invented by accountants who decided that they didn't want to do no more business as usual, that they had to take on some difficult challenges in order to make a bigger contribution to the business. They used technology, and then they passed some regulations and some laws that assisted them. And now in many companies, the CFO is equivalent to the CEO. But that wasn't always the case. The accountants, imagine the accountants got together and put together a plan to upgrade themselves and their profession. They gave up business as usual. And that's the third corner of what we're asking HR to do in the next how many months is to take this challenge. I said it was bitter medicine, but I didn't mean to make it sound that bad. I mean to say that this is not an easy business. That we're talking analytics, and if you can kind of remember what it was like to take statistics back in college, so I taught statistics, okay? But if you remember what it was like to take it and to be on the other side of the desk, you probably want to have nothing to do with that subject ever again. That may have stopped you in the past. Well, we're going to try to find a way through our training so that it's not about taking statistics. We're in a whole different world now, which takes us to the second secret to breaking that vicious cycle, which is what we call double-edged learning. Right? Double-edged learning. How can you tackle two big challenges in one? So as I say that, you may start to think, but Francis, I buy that the program, if you really address these three areas, it could work. But I remember me and the statistics, me don't like them numbers, them me don't know how to use Excel, and you want me to use data analytics. I am not up to all of that. I don't know if I can learn, if I can move to a place where I can get myself capable. I don't know. So, Kerron, Georgia, we talked about different ways that you've experienced in the past. But can you share a couple of experiences that can speak to this kind of belief in self?
Yeah. I guess I'll go first. I remember being part of an organization, a regional organization, where the HR department was small, and HR didn't have too much sway or an impact with regard to HR was seen as the high and fire people, and we had some things that we wanted to do because I jumped in out and I, me, I'll be energetic and I'll be like, hey, we could do this, we could do that. And the team was like, hey, we aren't sure because we have no idea how to get this data. We don't collect this, we don't think about it. And what we have to understand is that, being able to pull organizational data is not the sole responsibility of HR, and everything HR related does not naturally sit in HR. So I reached out to some operational teams. They had data on things like attendance, productivity, and all these things. Reached out to IT. They had their guys with their tools and some other data that they were collecting. And I was able to pull together a cross-functional team. One person from ops, one person from marketing, one person from IT, and myself kind of pushing that team. And we were able to drive certain work out there and push data out there to share how the workforce is moving, how productivity is impacted, how customers are impacted, and all these things. So while the HR unit may not necessarily have all the internal skills, if we understand where to get the data, where to utilize the skills, because IT did all the crunching, IT did all the analysis through my guidance, from we have the HR expertise, we understand the HR domain, we understand what we're looking for. They would do the technical weightlifting, operational teams would pull data from their operations that we probably didn't have access to in the first place. And so analytics really, and people analytics is all about the organization. So it doesn't naturally sit in HR. But if we can drive it because we understand what we need to get out of it, both operationally and strategically, I think that's where we could believe that we could get things done. Yeah, Georgia, what do you think?
Let me tell you something, Kerron. Self-belief, that's one that I struggled with for a while. When I think back 2006, and there may be some people online who, were you born in 2006? In 2006, I already had 20 years of experience under my belt. So I'd worked for 20 years in administration, in property management, and in HR. And I felt I had something under my belt. And so I wanted to move on and move into my own consultancy. And I did that. But I only did that after having done some research. After speaking with several organizations about training in their organizations, how were they managing? And they were saying that they had a challenge finding competent people to train their employees. And so I say, hey, that's an opportunity. And so I jumped in it. And I did that for a few years before I moved to Trinidad. And being in Trinidad for 15 years, when I came here, kicking and screaming, of course, we followed the husband. When I came here, there is no way I felt that I could have jumped into the Trinidad market as a consultant because nobody in Trinidad knew me. So I had to reinvent myself. And what did I do? I had to step back. I had to now go in an organization so that I could get some stripes. So I worked in a law firm, I worked in the financial sector, and I worked in manufacturing. And after having gained that experience for over 11 years in Trinidad, I said, hey, this is time for me to jump out again. So here I am once more in my consulting business. But what it says, you have to do the work. You believe in yourself, but you have to do the work.
Yeah, we last year's HR analytics conference, this is one of the things that we discovered is that, folks would want to come to the conference but felt like they didn't want to be embarrassed by how little analytics skills they had. They didn't want to feel more inadequate. There was kind of an internal kind of crisis of self-confidence for some who didn't want to take on something that seemed way beyond their grasp. So guess what? That's what caused us to actually develop what you're looking at right now, which is a conference series. So we decided to migrate from the 3 intense days of lots of topics and lots of speakers, because that kind of approach to a conference kind of assumes that you have a certain background and you can make use of hearing from 40 speakers in 3 days. Instead, we said to get to this ultimate impact business and to crack up this vicious cycle, we need time. So we need to put people in a structure where, and immerse them in a structure where over time they could pick up language. But in this diagram, we're actually just talking about the technical side of it. There need to be some technical skill. Now, you may not go into, Georgia, tell me if it's not true. You may not go into an Excel spreadsheet and ever pull up a pivot table and write a script in the background and do all kind of variables and all kind of thing. You may never do that yourself, but you have to have a kind of an understanding of an overview of what each step requires. You need to understand data at this level so that when you go to IT people don't look at you funny.
That's true.
That you're able to be ahead of them, right? You're so many steps ahead of them that they could.
Francis, you at least have to know the term pivot table.
yeah, at least know what you're talking about. So the mainstream of what we're asking for here, and I'm gonna acknowledge there is a question in the chat that I saw, and I haven't gotten to it yet because it's a wicked question and it's a great one. We'll get to it. But these are the technical steps that we want you to go through. And I mentioned challenge before. And the challenge is going to be spread out. Starting today, it ends in February. And we want people who participate to have the opportunity to spend so much time doing this reset that at the end of it, they end up talking different, speaking different, thinking different. And we can't do that in 3 days. So our master stroke of genius is to stretch this thing out, which of course makes it more difficult from all kinds of different points of view. But as the folks who are designing it, let me give you an idea of what's in the webinars. So you might need to take a screenshot of this because, oh my goodness, it's too much to absorb. But the first webinar coming up on the 5th of October is People Data Foundations. Second webinar on the 19th is Developing People Analytics Skills. Third, on November 2nd, is Defining HR Leadership using data visualization. We're bringing some overseas experts in to help us with that one. And the workshop, which is now even it's kind of the 3 webinars are to prepare you to take the workshop and the master classes. The workshop is running for 3 hours. The master classes are for 6 hours each. And here we're combining many of the elements from the 3 webinars into one major learning event where we'll take assuming you've already done the 3, and we're able to go much faster and much deeper. So Kerron is the main designer and the main deliverer, but we'll have other people, other panels, other people delivering content. I mentioned Jane should be joining us, and others will be joining us with different kinds of expertise from different parts of the world. But the entire line of stuff in green will probably look to you like a lot of technical stuff. And yes, it is. However, there's more. So you see that big box in the yellow? And you see where those dollar signs are? We've designed in more than just technical content. And this brings me to the 3rd secret. The 3rd secret is that we want you to make social and political progress in your company. And you can't do that by just being a data analytics whiz. You can't do that by being an engineer like I am. You need to pick up the kind of learning that will keep momentum going so that the reset doesn't stall, so that the reset ticks in the C-suite where it counts. Now, this would address the problem. You may, as we've gotten this far, you may say, okay, Francis, I get that the sequence could work. I could see that you're addressing my questions about my personal confidence because you're giving me language and you give me ways to think. But you don't know my CEO. You don't know that CFO. And you don't know that when we go to have meetings and then present them case for little and nothing and get money for it, that all we do is watch and say, how you get money for that? And you know you have places that you need to invest in and you can't get an investment. So you may be saying that we don't know your external. Well, everything in that yellow is about addressing your external environment. Kerron, Georgia, you want to speak to that a bit? Where you've seen this happen before?
Kerron, I know you're chomping at the bit. You have a lovely one to share, right?
Yeah. Let me go. So just before I jump in this story, as he's talking about that frictionless, pathway, the reason why, spreading it out, because people analytics is more than just technical skills. It's also behavioral. It's how you think and how you approach HR issues or HR related issues. And the best way to understand behavioral is to really spread it out over a period of time rather than, just pump everything. So there was this time where I had this problem where I was tasked with, improving employee engagement and turnover, right? Trying to look at, okay, we want our employees to be more engaged. We want less people to leave. We want retention, all these types of things, all the fancy high level stuff they think HR could do magic on, right? But of course, it would begin with collecting basic turnover data. What are the turnover rates by different departments, divisions, and that kind of thing. And with that, now we were able to identify, high turnover rates for certain types of employees and employees within a particular division. And when you dig deeper now, so there's the analytics part. So you got some data, you start seeing a little trend, and then you go in and you start figuring out, well, why is it happening? So we saw what's happening. Why is it happening? And a lot of these staff were leaving because they didn't get regular performance feedback and appraisals, which would have led towards, salary increases, bonuses, increments, all these types of things. So what I did now, you can't change the way the performance system is done across the entire company, right? So one of my principles that I follow is always start small and prove it. You prove it by starting small. So I started a pilot program with one of the operations departments to shift the way the performance system is done so that they can have a faster turnaround. It's less hassle for everybody, the staff themselves, the managers, and all these things. And what happened was there was a drastic turnover reduction in that unit. And because that unit was a huge contributor to the business, people paid attention. And we actually got the program expanded into something that we could drive throughout the company. And And this is still also, this story also kind of answers the question Tamika had, that the organization that I was involved in, they weren't very responsible in terms of, aligning things and getting management on task. But by our approach within that core area within operations and being able to fix that, it showed that we were strategic with what we were trying to do, because I was able to show the alignment. And it allowed the company to start realizing, well, we should be doing a little more like this. So we kind of did it by example, and we applied it. And we proved a lot of the talk that would have been done on the table, right? At the big seat, at the big table. And, with that, it actually pushed the company down a really good direction for the next couple of years when I was there. So how can HR truly be positioned to be strategic? Really kind of prove it. Prove that we are thinking to that level. Prove that we can solve some of the problems that are plaguing the company. And in turn, is one problem at a time. Once we start solving it, we good to go. Yeah, Georgia, what do you think?
Kerron, you're so right on the button. And I love stories, because stories just get to the heart of the matter. So I shared earlier about the learning management software, but I also had the experience of wanting to introduce a leadership development program. But I didn't want to stop it just at managers. I wanted to include executives as well. And if you know anything about Caribbean executives, sometimes they can be very touchy and the ego gets bruised. Yes. And I was one of them. So I know, I've been there. And so to include executives in the leadership development program, I had to be diplomatic. Why? What's wrong with our executives? They're good. They don't need that level of training. But I had to go deep. So I had to look at the data from some of the exit interviews where they scored low. And then I also had to look at the data from some of the satisfaction and engagement surveys where they also scored low. And that's where I went. So if we want to improve what our employees are feeling and experiencing, then we have to work on our executives. And that's how I was able to do that. But if I did not go into these details, into the numbers, into what people were saying, and marry that now with how this program is going to help us to make a shift, I would not have succeeded.
Great. There's a question about the replay. Folks, the replay will be available in about an hour after we're done. No, don't leave though, however, because I want you to answer this question in the chat. So we described this ultimate impact that we want you to have, which ends with the C-suite. What obstacles do you see that you need to overcome of a non-technical nature that you need to overcome? Just put that in the chat, because we've mentioned Kerron and Georgia have talked about a couple of obstacles, more than a couple. But I want you to make sure that we have your input, because your input is going to get turned into programming. But just put it in the chat for now. What obstacles do you need to overcome to arrive at the ultimate impact that don't have to do with analytics, but they have to do with everything else?
Does global warming come into this, Francis? I feel so, I think global
warming maybe, but not in this particular case. Oh, here is a wicked one. Tony.
Wow.
Oy. Please give Tony a thumbs up for that one. That one is so, I would say, even scary. But it's kind of like bringing respect to where respect needs to be given. And it often, this has to do with misogyny and all kind of other thing that we've seen. But yeah. Natasha says, government approvals. Yes, boy. I know a young lady who paid for AIHR out of her own pocket because she said it was easier to pay for it on her own than getting the company to pay for it for her. Management occult a bit. All great. Please keep answering in the chat, because the point is these points that you're making, we actually started out with our own list, and we want to increase the list because we started with these obstacles, and then we came up with support programs. So I hate learning alone. We discovered that from last year's HR Analytics conference. So here are some of the supports that we could put in that big yellow box that I described, where you could join a group coaching, where one person coaches a group of you over 4 or 5 months to have these conversations with your CEO and to move your C-suite, because it's not going to happen in one conversation. It's going to take many conversations. You can hire a personal coach, someone who you want to work with you as you make this reset a reality. You could join one of the learning cohorts that we have in CaribHRForum, where you're learning together with a small group, not necessarily led by anyone. But if you hate learning alone, if that's the obstacle, here's a one support. So here's another obstacle. I don't know what to say to a CEO or to CFO, and especially when it comes to money and funding. Well, we have a bunch of offers that we think, if we develop them right, they'd speak to what you're talking about, which is giving you the kind of language and practice speaking, practice making an ROI case, especially in key meetings like a strategic planning retreat, which is sort of my specialty. We also want you to be able to come up with sound cost-benefit analyses when it has to do with people, not just piece of equipment or investment in marketing, but when it has to do with people. Another obstacle, just the last example, is, you know what, Francis, I don't have the personal skills. Well, we put together, we're not going to call it this, but it's a nervous Nelly support group. If you're someone who say, I get so nervous around these things that I just stop thinking, well, we'll have a group that will help you to overcome that obstacle. If you need role models, we'll provide that also. If you don't know the tools that are out there. So these are all discrete programs that we have decided we want to offer in that big yellow bucket. So let me go back to the bucket and show you exactly what we're talking about here. In this yellow bucket of offers are one-time videos, so something you watch once. There's multiple videos and multiple training steps that we would put into our LMS. And there's also coaching from some of the experts that we found. Now, you may have seen this dollar sign all of a sudden has been introduced. Why? Well, the good news, bad news is that we're creating a sustainable program, and the people that we're asking to deliver these programs, we are going to pay them. So that means that there's an investment. Hence, there is a need to get that ROI and to get the C-suite involved. So I want to bring up actually someone who is a role model, and I'm going to ask Tamika to join me on stage. Tamika, can you join me on stage? I'm clicking the button, and you should magically appear because you were on stage before. Not seeing Tamika yet. But let me keep going while it does its thing. So Tamika has a story to tell, because we went looking for role models here in the Caribbean of people who became HR analytic experts who made a journey. And it's very hard to find people in the region. Internationally, no problem, but here in the region where it counts. So Tamika started off her background as a customer service rep in a BPO, and then made her way all the way to the point where she sells data analytics expertise back into companies, some BPOs, some not. I'm not seeing Tamika. I'm thinking, Tamika, you might have to refresh your browser, or we might be out of luck. Let me see. Let me check my... Tamika, is your camera on? And have you unmuted? We might have to... Oh, we're going to skip ahead. Oh, okay. In the interest of time, I'm just going to keep going. Okay. Tamika, if you're able to grab you on.
I'm seeing her now, Francis. Are you seeing her?
No. Is it just me?
It should be. Are you guys hearing me?
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Hi, Tamika.
Hi.
Great.
So
sorry
Tamika
about that.
also...
I wasn't checked out or anything. Just so you guys know, I received a call, I think, right as Francis was about to introduce me, with regards to my niece. She's at school, so I just got a call to pick her up. She's not feeling well, so that was that. But I'm working on it, so we're good to go. Sorry about that, guys.
So guys, the good news is I spoke to Tamika for about an hour, and we recorded the conversation on video. And she's going to be offering, as one of these supports, the Talk Data to Me brand of support content. Now, she's not the only person where I suspect we're going to end up with maybe 10 contributors or so. But hers is distinct because it starts off by telling the story and takes us all the way through. So the video, we're going to drop the video in the chat. So Dale just dropped the video in the chat. I don't have it on the screen, but it's about a 50-minute conversation, and it's a story. Let me just leave it at that. It starts with Tamika being a customer service rep in a BPO and ends up all the way on the other side where she is now. So Tamika, thanks for joining us. We're going to move on just because of the interest of time, and I'll grab you down from the stage. Guys, do not miss this video. It's a part of the training that we want you to experience today, of this experience. So let me just take Tamika down and let's keep boogieing on. So the first 4 sessions, including today, are free. And the ones after are going to come at a cost. And what kind of cost? Well, here we go, folks. So the workshop is, and these are US dollars, $199. The master classes are $399 each. The support videos are going to be anywhere, depending on the video, between $19 and $39. Support training is going to go from $49 to $199. Again, different offers. And the support coaching, who knows? Can't tell you what that's going to cost because it depends on the person who's doing the offering. So these are all different courses, and they're not technical, okay? But they're intended to have you have an effective and successful reset. So to make that happen, we've broken it down into 3 bundles. So the first one is the one that you probably used to, because this is one we always have. We always have a free option here at CaribHRForum. So the free option is that you attend the live webinars, the 3 live webinars that are coming up. The replays, however, are one of the supports, so there'll be a charge for the replays. And you can purchase any of the supports that you want as you go along. Just with the 3 webinars, you can upgrade and purchase these supports that would help you. For example, how do I get my CEO or my CFO to see that this is a good investment, that we do a reset, and then I come to the conference and complete the training, for example. Okay, so that's a free offer, and that's an e-ticket. The second offer is called the basic package. So the basic package is made up of 3 live webinars, the same 3, but now you're able to see all the replays. You get a certificate of attendance, but it covers the webinars only. And that allows you to claim 4 hours of CEU and CPD. And we have a special price today of $99 plus a 10% discount off all the support sessions. Guys, I know this is a lot and I'm doing it really fast. So take screenshots as we go along so that you can track what we're talking about here. And then the third is the All Access Pass, which I think Tony is asking about there. So the All Access Pass, the big enchilada, is 3 live webinars, the workshop on November 11th, which none of the other packages include. That's for 3 hours. The master classes of 6 hours each in January and February. And in between, there'll be a whole bunch of other activities. It's 19 hours that you can claim, and there'll be a certificate of accomplishment, not just participation, of accomplishment. We want to give you something that you could actually put on LinkedIn and something that you could show to your boss when it's done. Now, this is no small potatoes because, as I said, we want to make this sustainable. So the full price of all the bits and pieces put together without the supports is $9.99. However, we have a discount through September 30th, down to $4.99. And with that $4.99 comes an even bigger discount, 25% off the cost of the supports. So this is let me see if there's any questions about the offers that I've just described. I realize that we're a little bit over time by about 5 minutes, and I may be going through this too fast for you to absorb all of it. But here's a summary diagram that has all 3 of them side by side, and it has the links for you to go and check them out one by one. So this discount is going to be the biggest discount that we have to offer to the general public. It's not going to be offered again after the 30th. And we want you to engage in the reality that for a hard reset of this nature, it's going to need your C-suite support. We know that there are some who can afford to do it without C-suite support, And we want to encourage you to have that behind you so that it's not a secret project. And we'll help you. As I said, all of those supports are to help you to accomplish that. Kerron, George, have I left anything out? Folks, have I not answered any questions that are so obvious? Dale says, oh yeah, we have a group discount. Yes, we do. When you go to the all access pass page, you'll see that we'll give you instructions on what to do with it if you have a group and you want to invest in a group.
I think
Guys,
you've
have I left
covered it.
anything?
You got all the cliff notes. I think you covered
Cliff
it.
notes. Okay, great. I see Kerron holding his corners. So guys, take a picture quick, because I'm going to move on to our giveaway, which I think is, we're giving away a basic package today. And the first person to answer this question in the chat will win a basic package worth $199 before the discount or $99 after the discount, whatever it is. But it's a good piece of giveaway. All right. So here's the question. What are the 4 elements of the 3-corner program? Drop that in the chat. First person to get the correct answer will win. Should have played some music now. Da, 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 da. Dale said, we might not, no one, maybe nobody will get it right. I said, well, maybe we'll see. Because you need to have been paying attention to get this one.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know who was sleeping, right?
The 4 elements of the 3-corner program. Natasha, okay, great, Natasha, good to see you. Good to have you here. Liz says she should have locked her door. She missed that slide. Do we have a winner, or are we going to roll this on into the next webinar and we'll offer it again in the next webinar or over some more difficult question? But we did say this was going to be challenging, right? Tamika Thompson says, sessions, masterclass, no.
She tried.
No,
Good try.
She's not. She's close, but no. The slide did go by quickly tomorrow. Yes, it did. I didn't do that on purpose, by the way. I didn't, not to torture people or anything, but it did. It was the 3 elements of the design elements we're using to design the. So if there's no winner, looks like I'll just have to give the answer. Okay,
We
going.
We could roll it into the next webinar.
I think we're rolling it into the next one.
Yeah, I agree.
Up.
Look somebody there.
We have James has 2 of them. Sophia has all of them. No. No, not quite. Sophia has 3 of 4. Tamara is putting together some answers. ROI positive, people analytics.
Who has come the closest? Sophia has come the closest.
All right, let me ask Dale. Dale, should Sophia get the prize, or do we still?
I vote Sophie.
Right.
I vote Sophie.
I think we have a consensus developing here, Sophia, that you're going to get it because we're not seeing anyone else. So the 4 were people analytics was at the top. ROI positive was at the bottom left. Challenge was at the bottom right. And in the middle was ultimate impact. That was the slide that we got it from. So I don't have the slide with me here, but you can check it out in the replay and see if you're right. Sophia, I think you're the winner. Congratulations. And also, if you're here, guys, capture this video. This was one of the high points of the 2022 HR Analytics Virtual Conference. This is your bonus from staying all the way to the end. Want everybody to get something like in Oprah. You get a fit video. You get a fit video. You get a fit video. And it covers the opening session. You can fast forward through the opening session and go right into Fid's video. And it's available to you Can you share the link again for the survey? Dale, you seeing that? Okay, and before we head to the lounge, so we're going to go into the lounge in just a minute, and we'll be able to answer more questions about anything that we took place today. The conversation continues at least for another few minutes, and we'll be at the tables, and you can come chat to us and ask us anything you want. And the replay will be up probably within the hour, just a matter of click, 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 and it'll be available maybe an hour and a half. But folks, I want to thank you. As you can see, we're taking this particular one seriously, and we want you to really take on a mission, to take on this reset, this hard reset of company, your function, your career, and we know companies need it. And CEOs don't have enough HR background to ask for it, but they need it anyway. And we think HR has a unique role to interpret the need, give them the opportunity to have the reset, and to give them the analytics that they need to invest in order to have the impact that will turn the whole Caribbean around, let alone our companies. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Liz, thank you so much. Thanks, we appreciate it. Sharon Michael, thank you so much for your kind words. And Kerron said we're real happy to hear the feedback. And let's take on the challenge. Let's take on the mission. All right, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to end the session and see you over in the lounge. In the lounge, the next screen that will come up, just click on a table, and you'll be able to join one of us in any kind of video chat that you want. Any questions? Take care, everybody. Bye.
All right, guys.
Take care, James.